Hello, this is Thomas, and this is the video I'm doing for PokerSwat, and it's going to be the start of a series of videos going through all the basics, the basic concepts involved in six-handed online cash games. I'm playing two tables of 5 cents, 10 cents, no limit hold'em on full tilt, which is what I'll be playing for the whole series. In this video I'm going to be looking at pre-flop hand selection, so I'm going to be looking at what type of hands to play and where. And why it's important to pay attention to position. Okay, so just because this is a beginner's course, I'll just make sure that everybody will be on the same page as me and up to date with the lingo. In this hand here, I was on the button, but I folded. Steel Bird 524 is under the gun. Jazz Horns is under gun +1, and Saymond here is on the cutoff. So that's the phrase I'll be using to describe the positions. Also, Coldplay is the small blind, Chris is the big blind. So, if you look at what happens here, Jazz Horns has to act now without knowing any information. Whereas I now have ace queen here, I'm in the cutoff. I now have two pieces of information that he didn't. I know that Jazz Horns folded, I know that Saymond raised. So it's two pieces of information that I know that he didn't. And that means that I can play my hand better than he can. Me having ace queen here is better than it would be under the gun, because I'll have more information on what to do pre-flop and after the flop. So as I said, it's the same for each street. The later position you're in, the better, because the more information you will have once you get when you have to make a decision. That's a very bad board for me. I'm just going to check. I flopped nothing. And there's 3 hearts there as well, so I have very little equity. I'll just check. Check again. Now, if I knew something about the players, or I developed an image, I might try and steal that at some stage. But just in the first few hands, I'm just going to, relax and see what type of players they are. Okay, so here on this left, I'm in the small blind, and the small blind is actually the worst position to be in at the poker table, because for every street after the flop, you have to act first. Acting first is it's a disadvantage. There's many reasons why that's so. One of the important things as you become a more sophisticated player. Okay, so I'll come back to that in a sec. So here I have the absolute best hand in a pretty bad position. So I'll raise, hope someone, well, I was just saying I hope someone re-raises me. Okay, so now, you know, whenever you get kind of re-raised like this pre-flop, you have a decision of whether just to call and slow play it or to put more in. At this level though, I'm not going to slow play my hand, I'm just going to raise it up again. If he's min re-raising me, I'm assuming he has something he wants to go along with. The king's a good and a bad card. There's a good chance he has a king, but if he doesn't have it, he's going to be worried about it. So it may scare off some of the smaller players. I'm just going to bet here 2, which means I can just shove the turn if he calls. He min raises me. I don't think there's any point in slow playing really. So I'm just going to go all in. I'm only going all in for $3 more. Okay, and he's got king 8. He's a straight draw now, and he misses. Okay, so his play is crazy there. And we'll just have a look at what happened. So pre-flop, the min re-raises. It's the type of thing that good players won't do, but it's not necessarily terrible. I'm just going to type DragTheBar here. That small min re-raise, it doesn't really serve much purpose, but it's not on it, you know, it's not on its own absolutely terrible. Once I make it $2 though, excuse me, he has to fold, because you know, I've raised under the gun, I'm representing a very strong hand, and he has a very weak holding where he could get in a lot of trouble if he flops the king. So then you know, the flop comes up. Once that flop comes up, bearing in mind how much money he's put in pre-flop, I don't expect anyone to ever fold a king there. His min raise isn't great. Again, it kind of lets me know what he has, but it might induce me to try and bluff him more, or just shove a queens or something like that, so it's not that bad. Here on the left, I'm just going to check. That's a bad card. Queen 2. Okay, so as we just saw, I just want to just nearly doubled up with aces. Aces are a great hand, and in some ways aces are usually quite easy to play, because you know that after the flop, no matter what happens, you're still going to have your pair of aces, at least. So aces are going to be profitable to play anywhere, in any circumstances, pre-flop. And so will kings, queens, jacks, tens. But then you start getting to the more marginal hands. Something like a queen jack, king jack, 8-9, all these type of hands. They aren't worth that much money. If you go through a winning player's poker tracker stats, if you get a chance to have a look at how much money they make by their holding, and it's kind of blows people away when they see it first. You'll see most of your profit comes from aces and kings. I think something like a quarter to a third, depending on how you play. I'm just going to fold here, kind of marginal hand. So you make all your money in Holdem when you have aces or kings. In some way, all the other hands are kind of just cover, where you're not going to lose much or win. Well, hopefully, you're not going to win too much, or you're not going to lose too much with them. So it's known how to play the more marginal hands. That's very important, and it's also known when it's going to be profitable to play them. So when you're on the button, as I was there, your position is so important that you can play almost any hand. Now the problem is, if you raise every time it's your button, you force your opponents to react to you. So there's a kind of happy medium where you're being aggressive, but you're not to the point where you're making your opponents sick of you. So different people would have kind of different strategies for the button. I try and play something around 30-35% of my hands here. So here I'm on the cutoff on the right. It's a pretty good position, and I have a kind of mediocre holding. It's okay, but it's the type of holding you can easily raise with it from late position, because the position here is so profitable that I can play these kind of not great hands. This isn't a great hand by any means. 10-9 suited or 8-9 suited would be better. It's easier to hit it straight with it. But it's okay. I mean, it's the type of hand I would nearly always raise from this position or the button. If it was a little bit better 10-9 suited, I might raise it from a little bit earlier position. So there I was kind of talking about specific hands. So here again, I'm in the cutoff. It's a pretty good hand. It's not great. It's a weak ace, which is a problem. But it's a suited ace, which is very very valuable. Here I've been re-raised by Jas Horns. I've watching Jas Horns play just before I started the video. He seems kind of loose and bad. I don't know what that means though, the min re-raise, but it's so small I'm getting good odds to call. I'm definitely going to at least call with the fours here. Now I don't really know what to make of his min raise and then check. I'm just going to call here with the fours. But it would lead me to suspect he has a good hand, at least something like ace jack. So I'm in pretty bad shape against anything. So I'm going to fold. I'm just going to fold the fours here. So he had eights. So that's I'm glad I got to see that down. That's a very important bit of information. Here I have his hand now. Right, so there I have quite a bit of information, and that allows me to pigeonhole him as a player, like, and understand what his future actions mean. I'll come back to that type of thing in a later video. Okay, just gonna top up here. Okay, so different people have different pre-flop strategies, and it's possible to have two people playing very different strategies, but both of them be winners, as long as you follow some rules. It's possible to be profitable. Now, one of the things I think that is very important is that you pay attention to position. A lot of players. Look, some players you'll come across don't pay any attention to position at all. They play the same amount of hands under the gun as on the button. That's a huge mistake. And it's not something that many people do anymore. But what a lot of people do is they tend to treat different positions as the same. So they treat the button as the cutoff, and sometimes under the gun +1 as under the gun. I'm just going to fold that there. Here on the left, it's gotten short-handed, so I'm going to up my aggression a little bit here. If anyone raises here, I'm going to re-raise. Unfortunately, they didn't. So here, it's folded to be in the small blind. I would always raise a hand as good as 8-9 suited. Here I've flopped a good shot and a backdoor flush draw, but really I'm just trying to pick the pot up. Okay, so he's called up my flop bet. I'm just going to check. I'd often continue there. It's a good spot to double barrel because he might not have a 10. He can call. People will call very light on their flop. 40 cents. Okay, so it's too big a bet really, and considering he doesn't have much money left, I'm just going to fold. Now, if he had like 10, 12, $13 there, I might well call that because my hand's very disguised, and my 8 or 9s might be outs as well. So here on the right, I've got a kind of, it's a good-ish hand. It's not great, but what's most important is the position. Okay, so that hand's just too weak. There's no real reason to play it. As the game gets more short-handed, you should up your aggression. Don't go overboard with it, and it's a good idea to do gently rather than just starting to raise all the time. So just going back to what I was saying. So here we have a reasonable hand, Queen 10 offsuit. I would play it in later position, but it's just too early to profitably play. It's just too good a chance someone has me dominated. The real problem with hands like Queen 10, Queen 9, that type of thing, is that it's easy to be dominated by King Queen, King Jack, hands like that. So that's why you really don't want to be dominated out of position. Here on the left I've got a good hand, very good hand. So had Ogre shouldn't have raised, I would have re-raised him. Raising him a little bit bigger than normal because I'm out of position. And here on the right, Jazz Horns is making a big mistake. We'll be talking about this a lot in the second video, when we come to talk about strategy. I'm just going to put out here with my bottom pair and backdoor flush draw and straight draw. You should, if you're first into the pot, you should always come in for a raise, not limp. You want to take down the blinds, and if you can't take down the blinds, you want to create a profitable situation after the flop where you can easily take down what's in the pot. Just limping in doesn't do that. As you can see, I flopped a very weak hand there. I mean, I couldn't stand any action at all, but they just let me bet out and take it down. And I had a weak hand as well pre-flop. I mean, what should have happened in that hand was Jazz Horns raised and we both fold, or I call pre-flop and make quite a loose call, flop a very weak hand and probably just check fold, and that's even better for him if I do that because I'm giving him more of my money. So I've got a very, very weak hand there, so I'm just going to fold it. So your pre-flop hand selection is all about knowing which hands are going to be profitable where. I would advise not to have a very set strategy because sometimes you'll come across players like that and it's very easy to pigeonhole them and it's very easy to play against them because you can kind of tell, oh, he's raising on the button, he could have anything, or he's raising under the gun. So that's why when I'm playing, under the gun, I try and loosen up a little bit. I try and loosen up in as many ways as I can while still being profitable. So what I do is I tend to raise hands under the gun that are easier to play after the flop. The most difficult hands to play are when you have nothing, or you have kind of a weakish top pair, things like that, that could be dominated. So something like, I would never raise, well, I say never, but I almost never raise Queen Jack offsuit under the gun, because it's a trouble hand where if you get called, when people call raises, they tend to call with King Queen, King Jack, Ace Jack, all those hands. They don't tend to call Queen 9, Queen 8. Some bad players do, but in general they don't. So when you hit top pair, quite often you won't know where you stand. You won't be sure. Whereas if you raise with Ace King, and you flop an Ace or King, you're going to be sure you have probably the best pair, unless someone has flopped a set. It's just one less thing to worry about. But something like a 5-6 suited, if you're going to play any hand out of position, if you have the initiative, 5-6 suited is a good one to do it. On the right I would have flopped a house to 5-6. But anyway, it's good because you're not really raising with it in order to hit top pair. And you know that if you do hit top pair with the 5-6 and you get much action roll, you're almost certainly beaten. And usually when you flop pairs, they'll be the bottom pair, so you don't really have to worry about whether your hand's best or not. But you're really doing it to flop draws or flushes or straights, that type of thing. And the other important thing is it's so concealed. If you raise a 5-6, some guy calls and the board comes 2-3-4, he will just think that's totally innocuous flop, and that his pocket eights are probably good unless you happen to have aces or his bottom straight or whatever. So you're raising with these hands that aren't so affected by position. They are still affected by position, but with the initiative and a concealed hand, it can be profitable to do so. And the other important thing is that it means your under the gun range isn't too tight. You don't want to be just raising with aces or kings under the gun, because if people realise that, they just won't give you any action unless they have you beat. So this is a perfect example on the right. Jack 10 suited. That's the type of hand I would always raise under the gun. It's the best drawing hand there is, and I can raise an early position and disguise my hand. Now unfortunately I've gotten called by the shortest stack of the table, and that is a bad flop. I'm just going to check. He is so bad and has so little money, I don't expect him to fold any pair, so there isn't that much point in betting. Also, if I bet, I kind of commit myself to calling the rest of his stack, which admittedly won't be very much. So I prefer just to check and take the free cards. The thing is, if I was to bet there, I think there's a small chance I've got the best hand already. It's unlikely, but he's not going to fold an ace. He's not going to fold a king. He's probably not going to fold a pair. So I don't think there's much point in betting there. Better just to check, take the free cards. If he had $10, I would certainly bet that flop, because then it becomes hard for him. Because he had actually had a flop to set of aces. So I got kind of lucky there, because if my hand was a little bit better, I would have bet there. If there wasn't 3 spades, one of the reasons as well I don't bet there is the 3 spades make my hand so worthless, because I don't even have 4 eights. Usually I have 3. So we'll just close that there. Okay, so here we have a suited connector. I'm going to go with a suited almost connector, but it's very, very weak, so I'm just going to fold it. I wouldn't raise every time I got a suited connector under the gun, just from time to time. Here we've got a massive raise, and I have 10 high, so I'm going to fold. And now 5 gets a little bit unlucky. Oh, no. Gets a little bit lucky, and then gets a good bit of luck back. So here we've got a hand. This is the type of hand I wouldn't really play anywhere but the button. We've just got a weak guy limping in, so I'm going to raise him here. This situation here on the right is generally called isolating, where a weak player limps in, and I'm just looking to isolate him and get the pot heads up. Because if I can get the pot heads up, I can make a profitable continuation bet. Now, as that didn't happen at all, I ended up playing against 2 people, flop nothing, the guy goes all in, so it's obviously an easy fold. because here's 6-5 suited, and I could have raised that most of the time. Now the only reason that I was a little bit reluctant to raise there is I raised the last hand before and didn't go very well. So you don't want to make it look like you're tilting. You don't want to make it. You don't want to. Also, the more you raise, the more chance it is somebody will play back at you. So you don't want to get played back at when you have 6-5 suited. So sometimes if I've got a kind of marginal hand, if I've been raising a lot, I'll just let it go, because every hand you raise in a short period, it makes it more likely your opponents play back at you. And if you can't play, if you're not intending on playing back at them again, going over the top of it again, or if you don't have a hand that can stand any action, you're best off just folding, because otherwise you're just putting money into the pot for someone else to steal. But at this level, I don't think players are going to be playing back at me too much. So that's why I went ahead and raised it. So here we've got 4-5 suited. Now, this type of hand is difficult to play out of position when you don't have the initiative. The initiative is a huge thing in poker. This situation here on the right. Okay, so I actually have 3 options here. I'm just going to fold on the left. Once that player calls, I can kind of call here. I don't think it's not that valuable a situation to call here. I could definitely re-raise. That is probably would be my automatic reaction at a higher level. However, I've already re-raised once earlier and got snap called by Queen Jack, so I think re-raising doesn't have as much profit as it does at the higher levels. I'm just going to fold. But calling there would be reasonable. You know, I'm playing a suited connector. It's not that much, and it's a multi-way pot. But and this is just about what I was about to talk about. Playing draws out of position is difficult. You don't want to be out of position with a draw. Now the only caveat to that would be if you have the initiative, it doesn't matter so much. When you have the initiative, you just continuation bet, whether you flop nothing, whether you flop a draw, whatever, and you force your opponent to react to you. And that's an easy and profitable way to play poker. You raise pre-flop, you bet the flop. All of a sudden, it doesn't matter what you have, you're forcing your opponent to hold a hand. But when your opponent has the initiative, it's much more difficult. Now here, just with the poster, I'm gonna raise this. It's a very good hand as well. I wouldn't automatically raise King Queen suited from the small blind. The problem is obviously I'm in terrible position. Here I flop top pair. He doesn't have enough money, so if he goes all in, I would instantly call him. That's a terrible card for me. I have a good shot now, but he doesn't have enough money, so I'm not going to give him a free card. I just have to hope he doesn't have an ace. 10 queen. Okay. So I'll win that hand. That's going to fold here. So his play there is very bad. First of all, he limps pre-flop. That's a mistake. Then he calls a large raise with a bad hand. Just as I was talking about earlier, the problem with 10 queen is it's so easy for your opponent to have king queen or ace queen or anything like that. Okay, so I raise here with ace queen, and this guy's donking out into me, and I've turned the nuts. There isn't that much money to go in, but I'm still going to bet. I mean, there's not much point to checking. If he has a hand, if he has a hand, he's going to go with it. If he doesn't have a hand, I'm not going to get any more money out of him. So, instantly call. And he's gotten very unlucky. To a certain extent, he's gotten very unlucky. But again, now I don't want to criticise the players too much at this level. We're playing very low stakes. But his pre-flop call there is very bad. It's very hard for him to win the pot. If you look, see what hand I have. Now, obviously, he's in almost the worst possible situation, unless I had something like queens. But it was his own fault. There's no reason for him to call a raise there, especially as he doesn't have much money. Then his donk bet out and the flop is bad because he doesn't give me any chance to fold. You know, had he potted it there, I may well just fold. But he's just inviting me to come along. Okay, so this guy Coldplay who is raised under the gun. There's quite a bit of money in there, and he seems very bad. So I'm going to call. I hope to hit a 7. I don't hit a 7. So as I was talking about, there's two hands that have showed what I was talking about. It's hard to play draws out of position when you don't have the initiative. So that's why I'm very reluctant to call. Like I said, there's a straight on the board now. I just have to hope he doesn't have an ace. Sometimes I bet there, but the only problem is I think there's a very good chance he does have an ace. So I actually had the best hand all along. Here on the left, I'm actually not sure how I got into this pot. I'm in the big blind. I flopped a flush. So here I'm hoping he has an ace or something like that. And they both call me. Yeah. So in the situation this, my default play and what I think is the best is just to keep betting and hope that somebody has an ace or a high heart or something like that. And he bets out 50 cents there. I don't want to give, I don't think there's much point in calling. I don't want to give him a cheap card, but whatever high heart he has. And he goes all in. He could have a high flush, but there's no way I can fold it. So he just has the Queen of Hearts. So his play there is extremely bad. You know, one of the things I'll be talking about, I don't think any of our videos are going to cover draws. But if you've got a draw, you need to make sure your draw is to the nuts. Or close to the nuts. So, especially when it's a one card draw. For example, if it's okay to call like a bet with a 10 high flush draw if you've got two cards in your hand, because then it's quite unlikely anyone else has a flush draw. Now, obviously, I'm generalizing here. The higher your flush draw, the more valuable it is. But if you're drawing to something like a straight or one card flush, you don't want to draw to it. If that's your sole reason for calling, unless it's to the nuts, because the problem is you can get there and then you don't actually have the best hand and you lose your whole stack. You never want to draw to things that it's going to cost you your whole stack if you get there. I'm just going to fold here. Sorry, excuse me, I gave myself the hiccups. So his play there was very bad, because if I have the King of Hearts in my hand, he's drawn nearly dead. Now he got kind of lucky to a certain extent that he wasn't drawing dead, but he shouldn't have even called on the flop. And then his play on the turn, he shouldn't have bet out really. It was kind of okay as a bluff, and he should definitely fold to my raise. Like if I have the no flush there, no flush, he's drawn dead. If I happen to have the King of Hearts in my hand, which is a likely card for me to hold, he's drawn dead. Okay, so I've talked enough about that. Yeah, so it's difficult to play draws out of position, but it's not so difficult to play pairs out of position, especially low pairs. For example, okay, I'm going to raise with 5s here. You know, if I call a raise with 2 3s or 4s, you know, you're generally looking to hit a 2 3 or 4. If you do hit it, you have an extremely valuable hand. Sorry, extremely strong hand, and it's not that hard to play. And if you don't hit it, you can just fold. So that's why pairs are commonly the type of hand that a lot of people play out of position. I'll come back to that thought in a minute. Here with the 5s, I felt that was a bad board to continue with against two people, so I just checked. Here on the right, I raised with ace 8 and I flopped an ace. I just check it back because it's a kind of weak one, and I want to kind of pretend I don't have an ace, and I also don't want to get raised on the flop and have a difficult decision. Okay, so I've the way he's played his hand, when he just calls the flop on the turn and checks the river, I'd be fairly sure he doesn't have an ace. I'm fairly sure he doesn't have a good hand. He could have a jack, could have had some type of draw. Okay, so he did have an ace. Unfortunately, we chop it. So, you know, the check on the flop is, I wouldn't do it all the time, but especially I'd be more likely to do it when I have a kind of weaker hand, a weaker ace, just to kind of fill them and hopefully get money from worse hands on later streets. Okay, so when he bets out there, I don't think he has a 9, but I need to protect my hand because I don't really know what he has. I'm not sure what I don't want to see. I really don't find players make that play too much with a 9. Although I do play different levels than this. I think I'm just going to assume that I have the best hand and put him in. He can call if you want. This is kind of a semi-bluff where I think I've got the best hand. There's a small chance he fold a better hand. Fours. Okay, so his play is quite strange there. With his stack, he should just thrown it all in pre-flop. You know, he bets out and gets raised. And, you know, when I raise him on the flop, he should really consider he might be beaten. And then on the turn, okay, so I've raised under the gun. This is a very bad player. Coldplay has called. He's min raised me on the flop. If the game is more aggressive, I might consider calling or raising or something. But the last time he did it, he flopped top pair. I could already be conceivably drawn dead, so I'm just going to fold. The problem with that board there is he could easily have a set. He could have a draw. I don't really know what he has. I'm just going to fold. These players are so bad, and Coldplay is so bad that there's no harm in just folding those marginal situations. You know, against a better player or at higher stakes, I would probably call that and see what develops, because I think I'm getting good direct pot odds and so on. I don't really know what he has. It's a small chance I haven't beaten and so on. But here, I'm just going to assume he has some type of pair. He's not there's no chance of him making a move on me. Although that is possible. One thing to think about though, you always want to think about your immediate history. And I just raised with an ace, and I flopped an ace and I checked it. And then a couple of hands later, I raised pre-flop, bet the flop. So on a first level, or in the kind of first level thinking, I shouldn't have anything, you know, because I've just proven that when I flop something, I check it. So that's why betting there, you're kind of asking yourself to get raised, although at this level I wouldn't expect it to happen too much. But against weaker players, you always have to be very, very conscious of what's the last hand you played, because that's probably what they're thinking about. Their memories don't tend to go too further back. You really want to think about the last hand you played and the first hand you played against them. You know, your first big impression on them, not just the first hand you folded, obviously. So here we've got great position but very weak hand, so I'm just going to throw it away. Yeah, so I keep getting cut off. Draws are hard to play out of position. Top pairs, marginal top pairs are difficult to play out of position. So that's probably why I'm going to fold this Jack Queen. That's a very marginal situation. I would raise with it sometimes. If it was one step back, I'd pretty certainly raise with it. One step forward, never raise with it, pretty much. But just there, it's just in the middle where I would do it sometimes. Yeah, so weak top pairs are hard out of position. Top pairs can be difficult out of position, especially if they're the weaker they're harder to play. But sets are easy to play out of position, so that's why for a long time in mid-stakes Holdem, the only time some tight players would call raises is when they had a pair. So obviously that's very exploitable. It's very, you know, when one of those tight guys used to call me, you'd always know he had a pair, and he probably was just going to fold it unless he hit a set, maybe call if there wasn't too many overcards. It was very easy to play against that. So to counteract that, what some tight players have done is started to check raise whether they hit their set or not, and also to call with other hands, which is something that I feel is quite important. You don't want your range to be too easily understood. So I think you need to call sometimes with other hands. I really don't like calling with offsuit Broadway cards like King Jack, King Queen, King 10, unless I know that the player is bad, or unless I know a good bit about their post-flop tendencies, because those top pair out of position is a difficult hand to play, especially when you could easily be dominated. So against an early position raise, I'm just going to dump those kind of trouble hands. Now when someone's raising from the button, it's a different scenario, because their range is so wide that you could be very easily dominating them. In fact, if you've got King Queen, you're more likely to be dominating than dominated, because when a person raises from the button, usually if they're a tight aggressive player, it really doesn't mean anything. They could have anything from King 6 to Aces to anything, so you don't need to worry about being dominated quite as much. And also, you know that you can get a bet or two out of them as bluffs. You know, if a tight player raises under the gun, it's a different scenario, because then you do have to be very worried, because they probably aren't raising 10 Jack or King 6 or King 8 or those hands. They probably are raising Ace King and so on. Here on the left is an interesting scenario. We all have kings and threes and ace. It's very unlikely he has it's very unlikely he has a better hand, but the slightly bigger than pop bet is kind of often an indication they do happen to have some super hands, so I'm just going to throw it away. I would have called a smaller bet there just to chop the pot. But I don't like calling big bets to split the pot, because I think when people make those bigger than normal bets, it's often because they have quads or something and want to get paid off, and they assume other people are going to assume they're chopping it. So here we've got a weak ace on the button, but it is suited, so I'm probably going to raise with it. Got a kind of awkward stack amount if Macmillan limps in, so I'd probably raise bigger than normal. So this is a difficult decision, because I really don't know what a min raise means at this level. I don't play this level very much, or at all. I'm just going to assume he doesn't have a great hand. I do have ace high here. I'm just going to re-raise him. Now, here I'm just trying to isolate I don't know how you pronounce it. Macmillan. Okay, I flopped the flush drawn. You know, because if he does happen to have a better hand than me, it's only $1. It's only 1/10 of the stack, so it's not too bad. So yeah. Okay. I thought he'd made a house there. So I correctly assumed that I kind of thought his min raise didn't show that much strength, and he probably had a hand like King Queen, King Jack, 10 Jack, some hand that he wanted to play but wasn't great. Ace high is ahead of that. It's ahead of that type of range, so just go ahead and put him in. I would be quite loose towards short stackers unless I have some reason to think otherwise, because they tend to play very loose, very stupidly. So I don't give them much credit. I find it very profitable to just, if I have any type of decent hand, I think it's good against their range, just go ahead and put them in. I don't let them affect my game too much. So I wasn't going to fold days 2 suited there just because he raised. Now, that said, as you play higher levels, you will come across some people who play very tight on short stack. They might be professionals, or they might just not really be comfortable putting more money in. Now, against them, it's very important not to do that, and to give them quite a bit of credit, because a lot of those players will play extraordinarily tight, so there's no need to just give them money or equity. And then I would vastly tighten up my requirements to get all in against them. So here we have a very weak hand on the gun, so it's a easy fold. So we're just coming towards the end of the video here, so I'm going to try and recap on some of the important concepts. Your exact pre-flop range isn't that important. You need to find the style that suits you. Some players like to play more aggressively, some players want to play more tightly. There's loads of kind of questions about it, and it's not an exact science. For example, if you're an extremely good player and you're much better than your opponents, you can get away with playing much more hands than you would think otherwise. There's some players that will play stats something like 35-30 or something, which means they're playing 35% of available hands and raising with 30% of them. Now, most players, if they did that, would lose a lot of money. But there are certain circumstances where a very good player can get away with playing that much because they're so much better, and that they, after the flop, they outplay their opponent so much, and also, very importantly, get away from hands very cheaply when they're beaten. Now that is, those type of players are 1 in a million. It's very rare, but it is possible. Okay, so here I've raised with kings. As per usual, there's an ace on the board. I'm just going to check. A check here is kind of similar to checking with the weak ace in the hand and a while ago on the right, where I'm just hoping to get value from other hands. I'm in position, so I don't have to worry about the pot being stolen from me. And I'm just trying to induce a bluff or get value from worse hands. That jack's not a great card. You could easily have a queen jack or something like that. I'm just going to call this bet. Okay, 5-10 offsuit, so that's pretty funny. Wouldn't have put him on that. So there, my check on the flop made me 40 cents because he was drawing dead. He needed runner straight or 2 pairs, something like that. Basically had no chance of winning the pot. But it got him to put in 40 cents as a bluff because I was always going to call as a river bet. Okay, so just going back to my recap, what you should do is kind of just ignore what I said. Don't worry about playing that many hands. But know that your pre-flop, as long as you play in a kind of profitable style, the exact percentages should be dependent on your opponents, how they play, and also your own skill level. If when I run badly, I tighten up because I don't want to get myself in those marginal spots because I know I'm not playing well. And then when I am playing well, I loosen up, play more aggressive, put myself in more of those spots because I know I'm going to be making the right decisions, and so I can afford to play that few more hands. But whatever exact style you decide to go with, there's a few important conditions that are always necessary. First of all, you should pay attention to position. Whatever percentage of hands you're playing under the gun, you should be playing roughly around twice as many on the button. Maybe not quite as many twice, but something like that. For example, I'd play somewhere around 15% of hands under the gun and somewhere around 30 on the button. And each position should be different. Each position, as you get better position, you should play more hands. And the other thing is, your range shouldn't be overly predictable. You need to mix it up a little bit to confuse your opponents and make it much easier for them to misanalyze you. Poker players tend to remember specific hands that go to showdown. If a player sees a hand that goes to showdown, that will affect them a lot. Whereas all the hands that they don't go to see to showdown won't affect them anything like as much. So that's why it pays to show people unusual things from time to time. So for example, you raise a pretty bad hand to the gun, people see that, all of a sudden they don't give you under the gun raise as much respect as they did. So if you're then actually normally, if you're 99% of the time playing very tight under the gun, but just 1% of the time playing quite loose and showing down these weak hands, you can get a lot of action on your other hands, which is what you want. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the video here. I hope you found it useful. If you did, you should check out the other videos in the series. Thanks a lot.